in the city of Pacifica, and offer a recommendation for City Council to adopt a resolution authorizing the city manager to implement the automated license plate reader program to enhance public safety in Pacifica. Automated license plate readers are not novel technology. For over 25 years, public safety agencies have utilized ALPRs to enhance public safety in their communities. All cities in San Mateo County are utilizing ALPR technology except for the city of Pacifica and the city of East Palo Alto. East Palo Alto will be going before their governing body next Tuesday. These cities credit ALPR technology with a marked increase in arresting wanted criminals, recovering stolen vehicles, improving the solvability of criminal investigations, and locating missing and endangered persons. Recent years have seen a regional increase in catalytic converter thefts, auto burglaries, vehicle thefts, and organized retail theft. According to data from the Public Policy Institute of California, between 2019 and 2022, San Mateo County had a 53% spike in retail theft, making it the largest increase out of the state's 15 largest counties. During that same period, Pacifica had 2,364 reported property crimes. In 2023, Pacifica had 455 property crimes, which reveals an ongoing trend in catalytic converter thefts, auto burglaries, vehicle thefts, and retail theft. Moreover, our community experienced a brazen homicide and 56 robberies, aggravated assaults in 2023. Due to budgetary constraints, the Pacifica Police Department is an understaffed and under-resourced police agency. We believe that ALPR technology will serve as a force multiplier, increase operational efficiency, and deter and reduce crime without infringing upon privacy rights.
So what are ALPR cameras? ALPR cameras can be fixed on poles or mounted inside of vehicles. The cameras capture an image of the rear license plate and compare the alphanumeric characters with law enforcement databases, also known as hot lists. These lists contain the license plates of vehicles associated with active investigations, such as amber, ebony, silver alerts, or missing person cases or stolen vehicle or criminal offenses. When a match is found, a real-time alert is generated, notifying police of the location where the image of the wanted vehicle was captured. The stored license plate data also provides detectives with a pointer system to identify vehicles associated with suspects, witnesses, or victims, and to develop exculpatory information while focusing investigative resources. The data also allows detectives to connect serial criminal activities occurring in other jurisdictions, and this is impactful crime reduction outcome for our coastal communities and the peninsula as a whole. What information is captured? Criminals commonly arrive in stolen vehicles, vehicles bearing stolen plates, or vehicles that law enforcement previously connected to criminal activity. Utilizing ALPR cameras to identify these vehicles as they enter Pacifica will provide the police department an opportunity to intervene before additional crimes are committed and potentially apprehend wanted persons or recover stolen property. ALPR data also provides investigators with additional technique to identify and apprehend offenders after a crime has already occurred. ALPR cameras capture an image of the rear license plate or the vehicle characteristics in the moment in time when a vehicle passes the camera. ALPR cameras do not provide constant surveillance of a vehicle's location. So what is it and what is it not? Automated license plate reader technology does not identify any individual or access their personal information through its analysis of license plate numbers. There is no collection of biometric or personally identifiable information contained in an ALPR record. Unlike red light cameras, ALPR cameras do not have illumination to aid in identifying the driver or passengers of a vehicle, nor are they integrated with facial recognition. ALPR technology is designed to capture the rear license plate image for a vehicle identification only. So what are some benefits of the ALPR system? When a wanted vehicle enters Pacifica, a real-time alert will notify officers who will respond to that area immediately and saturate that area. Even if an officer is unable to locate or stop the wanted vehicle in question, suspects will see the police response and often be deterred for further criminal activity in that area. Generally, by the time a crime is reported to the police, the suspects have already fled the area. ALPR systems allow detectives to turn incomplete information from victims and witnesses into additional leads. Retail theft continues to harm our city and the community as a whole in San Mateo County. ALPR data sharing among local law enforcement partners allows agencies to collaboratively investigate, identify, and apprehend multi-jurisdictional offenders and obtain the best progress in court system. Private entities such as shopping centers, individual retailers, and HOAs utilizing the ALPR cameras may elect to share their data with our police department to include real-time alerts. Each public safety agency in San Mateo County has had notable ALPR success stories. Recently in the city of South San Francisco, their police department received a call of a motionless pedestrian in the middle of the roadway on El Camino Real. It was determined to be a hit-and-run collision with no suspect or vehicle information at the time it came out. Detectives at their agency searched their ALPR camera database and identified the suspect vehicle and were ultimately able to detain the suspects. We've also had recent examples of how the ALPR technology has helped the city of Pacifica. Recently, we were investigating a suicidal missing person and where a woman called the Pacifica Police Department to report her husband was experiencing an acute mental health crisis and texted threats of suicide to family members and friends. A cell phone ping revealed the husband was in the Monterey County area, and officers were able to correspond with the local jurisdiction, Monterey, and where they were able to immediately locate the husband with Flock and get him psychiatric care he desperately needed. Also recently, the city of Pacifica investigated a homicide and where officers responded to a domestic violence homicide and the armed suspect had fled prior to arrival. This resulted in a lockdown of a nearby elementary school and a shelter-in-place of nearby homes. Approximately 1 hour later, a sergeant with the San Mateo County Sheriff's Office entered the suspect license plate into the ALPR system in their city, and we were informed by them that the suspect vehicle was seen on the Bay Bridge. A series of ALPR alerts led CHP to ultimately locate the suspect in Ukiah, where he was detained.
To ensure that the cameras are not disproportionately deployed in any neighborhood or community, crime mapping or hotspots were not utilized to select the locations in Pacifica. The police department relied solely on traffic count summaries included in the 2022-2023 Engineering and Traffic Survey Study to identify 10 ingress and egress points with the highest volume of traffic. The ALPR program will include 10 fixed ALPR devices provided by the Flock Safety, and the activation of the ALPR capabilities of our existing Axon Fleet 3 dash cameras in 13 of our current police vehicles. ALPR cameras will collect license plate information from vehicles on public roadways, public property, and vehicles within public view. As the ALPR devices are a police investigative tool, we do not provide the locations of these fixed cameras. If subjects engaged in violent and/or serial criminal activities are made aware of these locations of the ALPR units, they could take measures to avoid detection. The ALPR data will only be accessible to authorized and trained staff members of the Pacifica Police Department that has to have a legitimate law enforcement need. All queries will be logged and subject to quarterly audits, both internally and through the Department of Justice. ALPR data will be transmitted in an end-to-end encrypted format consistent with the California Justice Information System, also known as CJIS, protocols and stored in a secured cloud platform. Data will be deleted after 30 days unless an image becomes evidence in a crime. In compliance with SB 34, the police department will only share ALPR data with California law enforcement agencies with an MOU in place. or a signed data sharing acknowledgement letter to ensure the access is for legitimate law enforcement purposes by authorized, trained personnel and in compliance with state laws and our police department policy. The police department will not permit the sharing of ALPR data for the purposes of federal immigration enforcement or for the purpose of prosecuting, investigating, or initiating any legal proceeding against any person traveling to California to receive reproductive care or gender-affirming treatment. Next slide is our contractual costs. The addition of fixed and mobile ALPR camera provides the city with a cost-effective force multiplier that helps direct officers to where crimes are occurring and provides invaluable investigative leads following a crime. The police department anticipates potential cost savings related to staffing by increasing the efficiency in criminal investigations while reducing the investigative time. On June 24th, 2024, City Council adopted the fiscal 24-25 operating budget. The adopted budget included an increase to the police department's budget in the amount of $45,000 annually to fund the purchase of this ALPR technology. Contractual costs will include a 2-year agreement with Flock for 10 fixed ALPR cameras and a 5-year agreement with Axon Enterprises to activate existing in-car ALPR cameras.
To promote the ethical use of ALPR technology in Pacifica, the police department will provide a public-facing dashboard to share policies, acceptable and prohibited usage, external agency access, a public search audit feature, and outcomes related to ALPR technology. We are committed to promoting transparency and accountability in the use of ALPR cameras to build trust while creating a safer Pacifica. When deciding whether to employ ALPR technology in Pacifica, the police department conducted extensive background research and hosted listening sessions with a diverse cross-section of the community. These groups included Pacifica Social Justice, Chiefs Advisory Panel, the Jefferson Unified School District, the Pacifica Unified School District, the Community Police Academy participants, and the Pacifica Chamber of Commerce. In August, the department hosted Coffee with a Cop at Lindemar Starbucks and visited numerous parties during National Night Out to engage in conversation with the community about public safety technology. The police department staff also reviewed literature from the Policing Project at NYU's School of Law, several publications from the ACLU, and information bulletins from the California Department of Justice. Thank you very much for listening to our presentation. This is a conversation we've been having in our police department for about a year now. We really wanted to take our time. Our approach to implementing any technology in the city of Pacifica is to do so with the least amount of harm to the community, first and foremost. We want to implement technology in a way that reflects our department values and our city values, and the way that we do that is through a collaborative process. So we are so deeply appreciative of all of the different groups that met with us, was willing to meet with us and spend time with us, and to contribute their ideas for our mutual success. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I do have 5 cards for a public comment from this chamber. Did council members have any clarifying questions before we go to public comment?
Not at this time, but I do want to comment that a lot of that is thanks to the fact that we did get to have an opportunity with the chief ahead of time, learning a little bit. And so I'm sensitive to the fact that not all members of our community have that opportunity, and we'll be listening acutely to any questions we might have to follow up on any community concern that might arise.
No questions.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Well, then I will start our public comment. It'll be 3 minutes. The same mention as before. This is going to be within the subject matter jurisdiction and on this item The first card I have is our District Attorney, Steve Wagstaff. Welcome. Thank you for being here.
Madam Mayor Pro Tem, members of the council, Mr. City Manager, Madam Attorney, Madam Clerk, I am Steve Wagstaff. I'm the San Mateo County District Attorney. I speak to you tonight to support the request of the chief and the department for these cameras. I don't need to repeat what they've provided to you, both verbally and in writing. I think it defines an excellent program compared to what's going on, and even more restrictive than what many cities do. I speak to you to tell you the impact of it, that it does matter, that there are lives behind this. I'll tell you what I mean. 3.5 years ago, there was a case where a fellow traveled up from LA, rented a car, drove up to San Mateo, found somebody that he believed had committed a murder on the freeways in LA, and he executed him at an ATM on a Saturday morning at 9 a.m. He then got into his car and fled. Face was covered, no idea who it was whatsoever. By the way, he was wrong. This man had nothing to do with the murder in LA. It was San Mateo's license plate reader that made the difference. There was no other way to identify that car. It was a tool for the investigative division of San Mateo Police Department, working with my office, and they put together a case to show this person did it. It went to trial this spring, and in June, this man was convicted of the execution murder. The family members of that man at the ATM, our murder victim, every one of them, I'm sure, if they were standing here, would tell you the value of those cameras. It's traumatic. But we don't have to go back 3.5 years. How about August 4th of this year in San Mateo, where a man angry at his girlfriend, she was 8.5 months pregnant, and he strangled her, and then he got into her car and took off. How and where was he headed? He was headed to Mexico. He had started to make arrangements to then go to China. We never would have caught him. We knew he was, but we would not have caught him. It was the LPRs tracing him as he went down California. He was apprehended in West Covina. He's now in our county jail and being prosecuted. The family members of our victims would stand here telling you it does make a difference. I deal with these family members of homicide victims. They care greatly, and they look to us as the leaders in this county to make sure that every tool that can be used to apprehend those who have committed these crimes ought to be used. I think it has to be carefully balanced against the privacy rights, but this does, the plan they have does. Thank you for listening to me today. I appreciate it, and I do support the chief and what she's asking you to do.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next, we have Holly Smalley and then Gary Furlong.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and Council and the city. My name is Holly Smalley. I'm a 17-year-long resident of Pacifica. I'm also the director of a local cannabis retail store. Our cannabis stores have enhanced security that most homes, most businesses don't have. And I work at LIT, and LIT completely supports the automatic license plate readers, and so does our security team and our staff. We want to be a good business. We want to be safe. And we'd ask that you please don't ask our police department to do their jobs without all the tools available to them. But tonight, I'm mostly here to talk to you as a woman. I grew up thinking the world was kind, people were good, and if you stayed away from drugs and you stuck with a friend and you got home early before curfew and you followed these kind of loose guidelines, you were safe. And for the most part, that may be true, but victims of crimes don't deserve to be victims of crimes. There's no moment in life where someone is inherently just safe. And it's difficult for me to understand that as a person. I still think people are good and that we live in a kind world, but I understand that that's not exactly true. When I was 23, when I was 22, I Took a forensic psychology class. I loved it. My professor encouraged me to take this internship, and I did. I worked under a psychiatrist in a probation department at CHAD, at the California Youth Authority, which was a maximum security prison for young boys ages 13 to 21. It broke my heart that year being there. I couldn't figure out, what are these boys doing? They should be out playing football, they're skateboarding. I didn't get it. And then in that year, I read their files, and it shattered me as a young woman. These were young men who were there for rape, for assault, for murder, for arson, and they had impacted other community members and their families. And as hard as it was to see these young men in jail, I was empathetic to their families because I read their stories in these files as well. That same year, I came home from my parents' house. A man approached me as I was sitting in my car. It was a warm night. My window was down, with a gun. And he said, hang up your phone. I was on the phone with a boyfriend. I hung up my phone. Hand me your purse. I did. Get out of your car. I did. Open up your trunk. I did. And he said, get in. And I froze. And I stood there. And that year at CYA, I knew I wouldn't be okay if I got in that trunk. And I ran. And I was safe. And I was okay. But I will ask you again, please don't ask our police department to do their jobs without all the tools that they need. And if it is your daughter that gets into that trunk of the car, help them find her, get her safe home. Thank you.
Thank you. Gary Furlong, and then Chris Redfield.
Hello again. My name is Gary Furlong, and for the last 3 years, Holly and myself and several other people have served on the police department's CAP program, the Chiefs Advisory Panel. Recently, those of us on CAP have had the opportunity to talk with the police chief, Sarasua, and Corporal Martinez about LPRs. As the chief can confirm, perhaps painfully, I've been particularly pointed and persistent in some of my concerns about this new program, as I believe that with the addition of LPRs, we're going into a new area of policing, and we need to be very mindful of it. I and some of the other CAP members have raised real concerns about the issues such as data retention, unauthorized use of data, and verification of data. And I have seen Chief Sarasua give in-depth, specific answers, and I have seen her open to new considerations in the policy statement regarding LPRs. And I now feel that I have a comfort level with LPRs being used here. Is a possibility of abuse at 0%? Absolutely not. But in the age of electronics, is the chance of abuse of anything at absolute zero? No. Consider that almost monthly I get a notification that my data has been breached somewhere or other. Has that led me to shun the internet, to cut up my credit cards, to refuse to join discount clubs, and to stay away from all things electronic, including my GPS-enabled car? No. Because I believe all these things add value to the quality of my life and are worth the small risk. That said, I also recognize that it is my responsibility to stay vigilant in regards to these things. Likewise, the citizens of Pacifica and the City Council have an absolute responsibility to stay vigilant to protect the quality of our life in this town, whether we're talking about LPRs or STRs. We live in the age when cell phones give away our location, when cell phone cameras record the date and geolocation of everything they see, of door cameras filming us as we walk by, of touchless credit card readers, people posting their every move on social media, fast-track transponders announcing our identification at toll stations, and Teslas being the subject of search warrants. It's time our police department joins the modern age with LPRs. I've come to believe that they will be an extremely useful and necessary tool for our police department, as I believe that we have got to put a stop to Pacifica being a conduit for those that are trying to invade law enforcement officers. But I say again, it will be up to us, the citizens, and our council to keep a vigilant eye on the policy and the adherence to the policy. My only question to you in closing is this: why aren't we getting more than 10? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Chris Redfield and Cliff Lawrence. And that's the last card I have. Cliff Lawrence is the last card. If anybody else wishes to speak, if you could please fill out a card. Go ahead.
Yeah, good evening, staff and council. I'd just like to lend support to this program. This is also like to thank District Attorney Wagstaff for his presentation and staff's presentation. Excellent work on that. The leadership has clearly shined. The tangible real world results are obviously been spoken to on several examples in the real world. It's kind of shocking to me, actually. I believe it was stated that we are one of the last cities in the region to have this program. It's about time to do it. Excuse me. It works in conjunction with, as was stated, the Amber Alerts and other alerts, which are critical, time-sensitive issues that clearly work. And I would just like to thank the department for the leadership on this and to implement this program as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. And Cliff Lawrence.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, Vice Chair, and council members. And good evening to the department. It's about time. I've been waiting for this for over 2.5 years. I've been asking about it occasionally, indirectly. Maybe people haven't noticed. I represent a local HOA with about 100 units. And we had attempted security cameras. We were talked into a system through Comcast, and it recorded the video, streaming video kind of thing. But it wasn't monitored, and about half the time wasn't even operating. Plus, I paid an extra $250 a month just to have the thing internet enabled. When we learned about Flock, I started asking about the possibility of an MOU here. We've had Flock for over 2.5 years, and I got to tell you, it's well worth the money. It keeps on performing. Our amount of sun operates the system just beautifully with very small solar panels in our community. It does great work on identifying plate numbers, and I'm really comfortable with it. It doesn't pose a threat to me, and I'm one that usually has problems with these kinds of things. Tying it all together, I think this is going to make not only our community safer, it's going to make the peninsula safer. And I ask that you allow these fine people to have this system because it's well worth the money. Thank you.
Thank you. Assistant City Clerk, do we have any callers on the phone, on the Zoom?
We have one raised hand for Carrie Luan.
Please go ahead.
Hi, this is Carrie Lujan. I'm a homeowner in the Fairmont neighborhood, and I'm actually a spouse of a Pacifica police officer as well. Earlier this year, I was actually woken up in the middle of the night to hear gunshots that took place down the street from my house. And it was an attempted theft of a car that had been interrupted by the homeowner. And the person fired shots, and thankfully nobody was hurt. But I was really disappointed and troubled by the fact that the department does not have the tools to track vehicles in the area. And, that leaves them without leads or suspects. I am in complete support of the proposal to install the license plate reading cameras across Pacifica. I think the technology would greatly enhance the Pacifica Police Department's capacity to ensure community safety and address criminal activity more effectively. Additionally, it also holds promise for locating missing persons and abducted children, further safeguarding our community. Thank you, and I truly hope that this is something that you guys consider.
Thank you.
There are no other raised hands.
Thank you very much. I think we may have one additional comment.
No.
And we don't. So I will close public comment and bring it back to council. Council members. I have a light from Councilmember Big Stick.
Thank you, staff. Thank you, community. We must have near the entire department in this room right now. Thank you for showing up in support of your own department and the interests of our public. I'm in favor, in case there's any doubt. As an employee of Safeway, where shoplifting happens on occasion, it's a matter of whether or not we can quickly enough call law enforcement to catch whomever the shoplifter was. It occurs to me that with this technology in place, that job might be made very much easier. And yeah, there's not much more to add than that personal perspective.
Thank you. Mayor?
I'm definitely in support, and I agree with Cliff Lawrence. What took us so long? I know that East Palo Alto and Pacifica are the only local communities that don't have the cameras, and I look forward to the police being able to use this to help them. And thank you so much for doing this. It's appreciated by the entire community.
Thank you. Councilmember Bowles?
I too am in favor, and I just want to say a huge thank you to our chief and Captain Glasgow and Corporal for all the research, for all the outreach you've done ahead of time, right, to really listen to the community and different groups, for the briefings you've given to council, for and in particular outreach to people who are concerned about privacy, right, and making sure that those concerns have been met. And yeah, we've not seen a single comment, against the system, and I think that's really a testament to the work that you've done, prior to bringing this before us. So thank you. I have two questions. One, do we need more than 10? As Mr. Furlong brought up, I think we're lucky that we have few ways in and out of town, and so maybe that, I don't know what other cities have, and I understand all the vehicles will be getting them too, so that multiplies our numbers. So that, and then just in terms of other cities and how long they keep their data, is there ever a time that it would be useful to keep the data more than 30 days?
Thank you, Councilmember Bowles, for your question. I think that we've done a tremendous amount of research to be strategic about the number of cameras and the location of the cameras, and now we have to implement them and then reevaluate. And reevaluate biannually to see if it's enough cameras. We will look at some important data points regarding crime. I think that 10 is a satisfactory number, and I will be able to report back to council when I know more about its efficacy in the implementation phase. As far as the retention period, I think that the 30 days, after having talked to a lot of the community groups, but also our detectives at the police department, we think that 30 days, while the least amount of time, will allow for us to follow up on critical investigative leads. So again, as we continue to evaluate the technology, we can make a determination at a later time if that needs to change.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Beer.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your presentation. For one, it was really well done, thorough. I really appreciate that so much. And like Councilmember Bowles, I really appreciate your community outreach. That's the most important thing that we can do in our communities, is create relationships. And it hasn't always been easy for our police officers to do that. So I'm really happy that you're doing that. And I want to thank all the officers that are here for your service, for protecting us. So thank you. I see you. And obviously, I'm in favor.
Thank you. I want to echo the appreciation to the chief and to all of the officers who worked on this. Your briefing was thorough. You were completely prepared, and you were listening to our feedback and our knowledge of the community in suggesting areas, individuals, groups that you might want to check in with. And I'm really proud of the effort that was put into the outreach. It's really commendable, and thank you very much for bringing us a really reasonable and well executed project. With that,
May I make a motion?
you may.
I move to adopt a resolution of the City Council of the City of Pacifica authorizing the city manager to implement the Automated License Plate Reader, ALPR program, and execute the agreements with Flock Safety for ALPR technology and Axon Enterprises to activate ALPR capacity on existing hardware.
Second.
And with the motion made by Councilmember Big Stick and seconded by Mayor Vaterlos, I'll start the roll call vote with Councilmember Bowles.
Yes.
Councilmember Beer.
Yes.
Councilmember Big Stick.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Beckmeyer.
Yes.
And Mayor Vaterlos.
Yes.
And item number 6 passes unanimously.
Thank you very much.
I would recommend we get through the Cal Cities part. Right, but one of them is delegate
Oh, yeah.
so either.
So we're going to do number 7.
Yep.
Yep. And then, so I'm thinking we'll complete item 7, and then we'll conclude this meeting and have a little break? Is that good? Sound reasonable? Okay. We'll give everyone a minute to finish saying nice things.
I forgot to thank the district attorney.
Huh?
No, we didn't. We thanked him. You can thank him. Yeah.
It was nice to meet him.
He's a really great guy. He spoke at Rotary. He's real.
Is this a natural time to break since everyone's talking, or do you want to take a little break?
Either or, it's all good.
Okay.
He's coming back.
She's coming back. All right, we have one item that we want to complete before we adjourn the regular meeting. And then we'll take a short break, and then we'll come back and continue our special adjourned meeting on the short-term rental item. So with that, item 7, this is the designation of a voting delegate for the League of California Cities Annual Conference. We need to designate someone who will attend from the council and be our delegate for voting at the annual conference. So, City Clerk Coffey.
Mayor Vaterlos, Mayor Pro Tem Beckmeyer, and council members, this item, as described by Mayor Pro Tem Beckmeyer, is to designate a voting delegate and also to designate an alternate who will attend the 2024 League of California Cal Cities Annual Conference General Assembly meeting on Friday, October 18th of this year. Each year, the League of California Cities Annual Conference convenes and considers a package of resolutions. The League of California Cities is an association based in Sacramento that represents the interests of California cities to the state legislature and provides cities with information on federal and state legislative and administrative affairs. The General Assembly meeting will be held on Friday, October 18th from 8:30 a.m. to 10:30 a.m. This year will be in Long Beach, California. I believe that all 5 council members are registered to attend this meeting, and in being registered, any council member is eligible to be designated as the voting delegate for that meeting. And then the Cal Cities also request that the city appoint an alternate in the case that the voting delegate is not able to fulfill those duties. With that, any questions from council members regarding designation of the voting delegate? This is requires council action to designate the voting delegate and the alternate, and then the city clerk, following this meeting, will transmit those selections to League of California Cities.
Very good, thank you. Council members, we'll do public comment on this, of course, but do you have any clarifying questions for the city clerk?
No.
Mayor? No? All right.
No.
Let's go to public comment. I don't have any cards for this item. If anyone wishes to speak on this item. Assistant City Clerk, do we have no calls, no hands raised from the Zoom call? Then I will close public comment and bring it back. And council, what is your pleasure? What is your preference? Is there anybody who wishes to volunteer? Or what do we want to do about this?
I don't want to do it.
Are you going to be able to make it down this year?
I'll second that.
Okay, you want to second her not doing it or yourself not doing it?
I would like to suggest that Christine does it.
I was going to do the same.
Well, I'm willing to. I was going to suggest that Tiger do it, because you had volunteered last time, and I don't think you got to vote on anything, and this might be your last
Well,
night for a little while.
It's often the honor of the mayor to be chosen as the delegate. And unfortunately, there was nothing to vote on by the time I got there, but I'm content that my turn was taken. If somebody else would like a turn at this point, understanding that both our Mayor Pro Tem and our former Mayor Beer have both had the opportunities of being voting delegates. I
I'm very willing to
appreciate
do it
the,
if no one else has a great desire.
Now, that being said, as per usual, I'll be there by car, so I don't have a flight that's going to be pressing. Factor that in how you will. I'm perfectly happy with Councilmember Bowles taking lead on that.
So I nominate Councilmember Bowles as the delegate and Tiger Jazz Big Stick to be the alternate.
I'll second that.
May we have a roll call vote?
Let me just a second for that motion, please.
I second.
Mayor.
Okay, sorry. So the motion made by Mayor Vaterlas to appoint Councilmember Bowles as the delegate and Councilmember Big Stick as the alternate, seconded by Councilmember Beer. I'll start the roll call vote with Councilmember Bowles.
Yes.
Councilmember Beer.
Yes.
Councilmember Big Stick.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Beckmeyer.
Yes.
And Mayor Vaterlas.
Yes.
And that passes unanimously.
Thank you very much. All right, then we will adjourn our regular meeting, and then we'll call to order the special regular adjourned meeting. And can we call it to order and then take a break?
Yes.
All right, we're going to call, or take a break and then call it to order? That's kind of what I thought, but I'm reading this green sticky here that made me think I should do it the other way around. All right, very well. So this meeting is adjourned, the regular meeting is adjourned, and we're going to take a 10-minute break. Ooh.
Recording stopped.
You never need to apologize for
From our August 26th continuation of the short-term rental item, which is listed as item 8, but it is a new meeting continuing our last meeting from last week. And so it'll be a continuation of council deliberations. We have a brief presentation from staff. But one thing that I wanted to make sure to explain is that public comment for this item was taken at the last meeting. And so we are not having public comment tonight on this item, either in the chamber or via Zoom. So we do encourage anyone who would wish to make a public comment, to email the council and share your information with us. And with that, I will turn it over to our Assistant City Manager, Yulia Carter. It looks like we have Kavitha Kumar, our Interim Community Development Director, Stephanie Cervantes, our Interim Deputy Community Development Director, and I don't know who else is on Zoom or with us for the meeting, so I'll let you take it away.
All right. So thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. So I'm Yulia Carter, Assistant City Manager, and we have a brief presentation for you today. As you pointed out, this meeting continuation from August 26, 2024. So before we dive into continued deliberation with the council, we wanted to give you a quick recap where we left off. So you can see it on the slide. So the City and Council discussed the following policy options for the new ordinance. So you touch base on hosted versus unhosted STRs, primary residence requirement, permit limits, occupancy limits, parking requirements, minimal rental duration, inspection requirements, and permit processing. We also discussed the notice to permittees, 24/7 contact requirement for STR permit operators, and the development of the administrative policies and procedures, which is already underway. And what is remaining and what council have not discussed yet are 3 remaining items. Multifamily property requirements for STR operators, density question, and also zoning differences between coastal and coastal zones. So we recommend to structure this conversation starting with item number 2. So we go through the council deliberations on this remaining items, and then we go back to item number 1 to confirm your direction from the last meeting. So this way we close the loop. And with that, so we continue our policy consideration, and I want to turn it to the interim Community Development Director, Stephanie, to walk us through this.
Thank you. Stephanie Cervantes, Acting Deputy Director for Community Development. And I will be walking us through the remaining policy considerations that the council left off. So the first would be the multifamily properties. Council had previously directed or requested that staff look into allowances of SDRs in multifamily residences. As stated in the staff report, the city does currently have a number of SDR permits on properties with more than 1 unit. That information was in the staff report. And so now staff is, after reviewing the existing SDRs for multifamily properties in the city and also reviewing other jurisdiction example ordinances, staff is recommending 2 things. One is to limit SDR permits per multifamily residential building with 5 or more units sharing common walls, and also that in multifamily residential buildings consisting of 4 or less units, when sharing a common wall, that each SDR should obtain its separate SDR permit as well. And so at this point, I can open it up for council deliberation, or I can continue with the presentation, and then we can come back.
Okay, I just was trying to make sure I understood that. I was reading it a couple of times. Did anyone else have a question on that?
There was from the previous packet, 107, a list of SDR properties with multiple units. I think that might be helpful.
Oh, good.
To pull up, so we know the impacts.
Ms. City Clerk, would it be possible to open up the packet, the agenda packet?
Do you have a page reference on that?
Give me one moment, please. Yeah, 107. And if I can just, while she's pulling that up, the bullet point number 2, I guess I thought we were already doing that, 1 STR permit per unit.
We are, yes.
But we're not limiting the number. If you had 4 units, you can have 4 STR units as long as you have 1 permit per unit. Is that what it says?
Correct.
That's what it looks like it says.
Oh, so that's the change. That's the change. So,
Okay.
so exemption would apply to building with up to 5 units, you would allow STRs. And for buildings with 5 units, you will start restricting it with 1 STR per unit. That's what it says.
If I could jump in, because I think what I'm hearing Councilmember Bowles say is that for 4 units or less, there's no change for, every unit has to have a permit. That's what we currently do. So that's not a change in this. It's just the cutoff point between 5 or more units only being allowed 1. And then the chart which shows here the multi-unit buildings of 2, 3, 4, up to 4, and one with 5 is listed here. It would just be status quo. They need that number of permits.
And then at the last meeting, we talked about a primary residency requirement, and we'll revisit that. But how is that? Are you suggesting that does not apply here in your recommendation? Would an owner need to live in one of the units?
Well, but again, those units could be owned by different parties. So the primary residency requirement is a separate requirement that we would have to go back to and revisit this too. But when we talk about multiple units, like fourplex, this fourplex may have different owners.
Could have 4, or it could have 1, right? Because
Exactly.
that's why I was a little puzzled, because I was reading it as, I was thinking of an apartment building, which would traditionally, in Pacifica at least, mostly have 1 owner of the building that rents the units out, right? Wouldn't you agree? I mean, I'm in New York, people own apartments, but I don't.
Otherwise, it's a condominium, right? It's a different ownership structure.
Maybe. I mean, I think so.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I had an opportunity over the course of the last couple of weeks to have 4 meetings, 2 for, 2 against, for lack of more specific.
Yeah.
And one of the meetings I had with suggested that in the case of these STR management companies, Marbella Lane or whatever, the idea that they don't actually own these units, that somebody owns them and then they have Marbella Lane manage them. Now, whether or not Marbella Lane has so much money that then they're giving, hey, you, go buy that and then we'll manage it and we really own it. I don't know. And these are things I don't know. But it strikes me that if that is a business model for a corporation, then it could be that even though in name there are 4 independent owners of 4 independent units in an apartment complex, if you see what I'm getting at.
So I think what I'm hearing you say is you're differentiating between the named owner and the actual manager of the property.
Without more refined research, that was an understanding I was given.
Okay. And so then the question would be, because if I'm remembering the way it's structured, is our permit process allows an owner to designate someone else as an operator of the STR and thus the permit holder presently. The STR permit holder could be someone other than the owner of the property, so long as the owner signs off that they allow. That's how it currently is, right? I believe it is. Staff?
Yes, that is correct.
So what we're saying is, I don't know what we're saying, but what we want to do is discuss this issue in light of how it is now and how we wish it to be in the future, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And staff confirmed that we're changing our application so it's an owner that applies, not an operator, right, for the STR. So we have the owner's information.
Okay.
So,
All right, then I do have two hands. So I don't know if we need to talk more about this item, or is your hand on this item?
It is.
Oh, go, please,
Yeah.
Councilmember Beer.
Thank you for all of your work on this, and I appreciate you. But I do disagree. I kindly disagree. Having lived in multi-family residential buildings, I don't think that calling out a shared common wall, I don't think that matters, in my opinion. I think that we should look at all multifamily residential buildings and only allow one permit per multi-family residential buildings. Not just if there's 5 or more, but all the way down. So like if you have a duplex, you can have 1. If you have a threeplex, you can have 1, 4, 1, 5, 1. So that's what I am pushing for, because of it's the naturally affordable housing in our community. And if we continue to get rid of these naturally affordable units in our community, we are hurting our community.
yeah. I mean, I agree with that too. And I mean, I still remember the story of the 4 low-income tenants that were evicted from this one building on this list with 4 units. And I don't think that's right. I mean, back to your discussion before about, I mean, if the units are owned individually, I'm assuming they're condominiums, and then therefore they can fall under the rules they could fall under the rules that we've established previously of a primary residence. So you're allowed to rent it for a certain period if you're the owner and live there as your primary resident.
Wait, we didn't make that rule yet.
Okay, I thought
No.
I thought there were certain things that we had
I don't think-
deliberated and
I don't
agreed
think
to,
we
but maybe we need to go back, if we
I
need to
think
go
we
back.
do.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, anyway, yeah, I mean, if it's a condominium, they're owned differently, and they're typically built differently with better sound separation and so forth than a, but, yeah, I would want to limit otherwise to 1 per building.
Okay, so you're in agreement with what Mary just said?
Yeah.
Okay. Mayor, you're up.
Let's see. I mean, I do know a building on Beach Boulevard that rents all 4 units as STRs. They would not be affordable as rentals, but they would be rentals available if they weren't STRs. So if you're going to limit 1 per multifamily building, then it should be 1 per multifamily building, not necessarily 4 or more. Or 4, yeah, sorry. But condos, you can't, I mean, those are individually owned. How can you determine what somebody else does in their unit? So those are totally separate.
Okay. Did you have a question, Assistant City Attorney?
No, I think we were just discussing the variation, whether a condominium would be considered a multifamily dwelling, and I think we're of the mind that it is. But there's no comment, and it sounds like...
No, it isn't. Those are, a condominium is individually owned. How can you say it's, I mean, they're mostly all planned unit developments, which are considered single families anyway. But a condominium, you can, I mean, if you have a building with 50 condominiums, how are you saying that's going to be 1 in the entire complex can be a short-term rental?
For me, that counts as a single-family residence, and whatever rules we apply for a unit otherwise. I I mean, do you have particular examples of buildings that look like apartment buildings that are individually owned, on this list?
I will get back to that. I just wanted to respond to the comment. So condos, if there's two or more, they're typically still considered multifamily land uses. That's how zoning and the land use work. So we would need to clarify what this recommended language, it would apply for. Would it apply for multifamily apartment buildings and or multifamily condo buildings, or just an umbrella multifamily? That's really where we would want some additional direction.
It sounds to me like we need to differentiate condos from apartments.
Yeah, because I didn't think we were talking about condos.
Even though I agree, I mean, thank you for clarifying the land, from a land use designation standpoint,
Yeah.
they're the same.
So the question that's begged in my mind is, entity A pays person A, B, and C to buy up 3 units in a condo so that entity A can manage those 3 condos as STRs, right? So, I mean, the larger question is, how many of those condos would you like the company to be able to buy up to flip into STRs? Okay, it's not naturally occurring affordable housing because it's not an apartment complex. I hear that.
I think the other point, I mean, that I raised the last time is most condos have HOAs, right? And so, I mean, that's another way, you know, I know staff didn't want to review particular HOA papers, but asking on the application whether it's an HOA, and I think even asking for a letter, whether or not you feel we can enforce it, at least so we know, and we're, you know, notifying the HOA so that, you know, they can take action. I spoke to 3 different organizations with HOAs, the Fairmont Homeowners Association, the Sky Ridge, which, you know, both of those have a lot of units, and both of those have language that limit to rentals to 30 days in their contracts already. Pacific View Villas is the one that's struggling. I knew of one unit that I brought up that, you know, they have those restrictions, but the person didn't want to follow the laws and got a permit for an STR. Well, now there's actually 2. So out of 8 units, 2 of them are STRs. And that poor HOA is a small HOA that doesn't have the money to sue those people. So, I mean, I'd really like to see how we can encourage people to do the right thing. However we can, that's not too difficult for legal and staff.
I was going to, if I may, just chime in, because this is an example where there could be lots of different permutations and arrangements and legalities, but if, and we don't have to figure all of that out tonight, that, you know, when we go to develop the ordinance and do more research and talk to Coastal Commission staff and then bring it back, we'll have to be putting sort of the dressing on all that. But if the council's intention, it could help to be saying that if your intention is an individual unit that is individually owned is not subject to this. So in other words, a typical, you know, duplex or triplex or more that's an apartment building, those are not typically individually owned units, but different permutations, townhomes or condos or whatever, are typically individually owned. And so that would be a way to think of it if the direction is a situation where there's individual units that are individually owned, then they fall to the other STR rules. They don't fall to the multi-family residential building rule.
Correct, and I would just elaborate a little bit more and say that the way to view a condo multifamily structure is to view it more like multiple single-family residences. And so what we have, discussed previously, and I think what you're going to discuss in the future tonight, is other restrictions that we want to place on single-family owned property to try to address the issue with large corporations who may want to buy up properties for the purpose of STRs. So, and I think, thank you for that, context, because I think that's a good way to look at condos. And maybe you can save this discussion on how you want to deal with condos until after we've had this discussion later on in the evening regarding how we want to deal with natural persons versus corporations versus primary residency requirements, because I do think that will address some of the concerns with corporate entities owning properties.
Okay.
I have a question about process.
Okay.
So we did give direction, a lot of direction, right, before we adjourned the last meeting. And so I think I'm not clear about that. So are we going to hear the direction that we already gave? Are we talking about that again? Like, I thought we already gave direction on some of it. Thank you.
And Ms. Carter's first slide had item number 1, where we received direction on a lot of topics. There are some clarifications that we need to go back to and clarify because they bleed over into whatever the council may decide on these new policy considerations. So we will be going back and recapping and revisiting and discussing further the direction that was received on those earlier ones.
Yeah, I think before we conclude tonight, we'll go back over all of it, but I think what we wanted to do, if we can, is pick up what we didn't complete last time and focus in on those.
And if I could just make just a general comment. So on any of these given policy considerations, except for one, we haven't done the fiscal analysis yet. So after council gives direction, when we come back to council, we'll need to say, okay, this decision about the multifamily portion of this program is X fiscal impact to the city's general fund. So I just want a general caveat about the overall
But if you're going to do that, if that's part of our future deliberations, then I think we need the economic analysis in general. How much do SDRs really make and how much are they really costing us, right? Because, I mean, we've heard both sides that,
yeah, if I could chime in
total income.
on that, Councilmember Bowles, because I think that's a great point. So let me talk about fiscal impact analysis for a second, just to set context. So there are some basic and direct impacts to TOT to the city, to transient occupancy tax to the city that we can do. If the council is interested in a very substantial and robust fiscal impact analysis that factors in how much does a renter bring into a community versus how much does a short-term renter bring into the community, that is going to be a separate and distinct and costly and complicated fiscal analysis for the city. And we'll have to pursue that separately. It'll take a long time. San Francisco is not Pacifica. You can't generalize those provisions, and we'd have to do it specific to Pacifica, and we'd have to employ economic consulting firms that can do that analysis. So I just want to set that expectation clearly, is that's a very complex analysis. It's like the retail leakage analysis or guidelines in it, and there's a lot of research, and that's beyond staff's capacity to do it. So we'd have to hire a consultant to do that. So I wanted to make sure to make that clear.
I think one question I have on that piece is, how much the city has looked at costs associated with enforcement of short-term rental ordinance. I mean, the reality, I understand that we haven't changed it yet, so you can't really speak to that specifically, but, what are we talking about in terms of code enforcement? What are we talking about in terms of police? What are we talking about in terms of building inspection? Some of the ideas that we've discussed involve having a physical inspection of a property. How would the cost of that inspection be borne? And what other policies do we have in other inspections that the city requires, and who bears those inspection costs? So I think that's some of the information that I certainly need to hear. It seems a little easier to arrive at than what you're describing, but in general, I think we need more information about that side.
But I think we also, I mean, at least Airbnb in the last letter that they sent talked about occupancy rates. And so, I mean, there's still like a dollar amount of how much a person spends, whether it's an STR or whether it's a resident. And if you're vacant for a certain amount of time, it's, I mean, sure, it's not the same pot of money. It's a TOT versus a sales tax, but it's still revenue to the city. So I have a problem with just looking at one side of the equation.
Right, and I mean, the reality is, and we do have this analysis somewhere, because I've seen it, I think all the way back to John Keener was the one who opened my eyes to the difference between the revenue generated from TOT and the revenue generated from sales tax. But your point about when there's vacancy, nobody's generating either TOT or sales tax revenue. And then the notion, and it's well taken, of the idea of a year-round support of businesses with residential occupancy, businesses like the veterinarian and the optometrist and things like that, that might not be, well, in all likelihood wouldn't be frequented by short-term rental guests. So that's the level of detail that you're saying we need to hire a super, specialized staff firm to do that kind of analysis, right?
That's right. That's right. There are a lot of, you've just mentioned very many variables that would go into that kind of calculation.
And then you have the one example of, he sent us a letter from Cotton Crustaceans saying that a lot of his business comes from short-term rentals. People tell him that that's why they're coming there. So how do you actually know that? How do you know who's going to restaurants and who's not, and who's spending money in different places? I think that's a very complicated issue.
I agree. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, I agree too.
Okay.
So just one more point on these multiple units. So when you're talking about affordable housing and I know just going through our housing element, like duplexes, for example, are a lower price point for people to buy too, right? Whether they're individually owned or, maybe you own the whole building and you're renting out the other to help you pay. So it does make me nervous to have too many of these, being taken up by businesses when we do have such a shortage of housing. Yes, I don't know, whether it's but some of those are residents. There are a bunch of duplexes next to me and I know the owners, right? So if they want to rent out in their own place, the rules that we have for homes could also apply.
Well, and I think we should concentrate on that because we did have the topic of natural person and those issues about residency, primary residency and all of that I don't think we concluded on at our last meeting. And I'd like to, first of all, correct? Am I remembering it correctly?
I don't think we did.
I don't think we did either. I think we talked around and about those things, but I feel like this council tonight needs to nail that down in terms of being able to give direction to staff.
Great.
So let's work on it. And so to your point about process, what is our process? How do we want to do this, people?
Yeah, so I guess I would chime in to say, is the council interested for the multifamily properties policy consideration? Is the council interested in parking that for now while we revisit some of the others and then come back to it? Or do you want to set a preliminary direction to staff? And what would that direction be? And then we can always come back to that as well.
I would like to set preliminary direction to staff. And I've already said what I think my direction should be, and that would be 1 unit per multifamily residential building.
Whether that building has two units in it or 20.
12, yeah.
Mayor?
I think that this wasn't even suggested, but maybe like a percentage. I mean, if you have a 4-unit, you can rent 2. If you have a 2-unit, you can rent 1. If you have 6 units, you can rent 3. What about a tiered approach?
I think the other point that was made is that when you're living in close quarters, people coming in and out have a much bigger impact than if you're separated as a house. So I don't feel comfortable with, a lot. I mean, I don't know how many buildings we have that are more than 5 units. Right now, we don't have any applications in those buildings, but.
Right.
If I can chime in, sorry, and just, because that point, in staff's analysis, one of the factors that we looked at was, to Councilmember Bowles' point, when you're in close quarters, people coming in and out are a big impact. So if there is 1 unit that is a STR in a duplex, a triplex, or 4, could potentially be a big impact to those others in that unit, as opposed to if all of the units up to 4 are short-term rentals. Then it's less of an impact to each of those because they're all short-term rentals. So we looked at that, and we looked at the list that we have in front of us about, what the reality is that exists, and that's how we came up to, the thought, the recommendation that we're making. But I just wanted to make that point about the impact.
Do we have data about how many duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes we have in town?
Yeah, I'm wondering that too.
We don't have that available tonight.
Yeah. It's just really dangerous once you open that up and then all that housing can get sold for this.
But again, the council has a cap that is in place.
I know, but anyway, we're going to come back to this one, I think.
I'm inclined toward 1 per building with this caveat. I don't know how many buildings we have that have 10 or 20 or 30 apartments in them. So that's the thing that I wonder about, because I'm thinking about, I forgot the name of it, the building that's across the street from IBL.
Yeah,
There's a whole bunch of units in there. The building on Clarendon, it's big. I had to deliver something there once. I'm like, whoa, there's a lot of units in here. So, yeah.
Like Talbot? Talbot's huge.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about Talbot, right? So.
That's true.
The idea of some ratio maybe is relevant or something to think about. I'm not sure 1 in a duplex is equivalent to 1 in a 30-unit building. Do you know? But I hear the point, and I understand and I agree with the point that apartment living is generally more affordable, and this whole notion of naturally affordable housing is something that we've used in many discussions. That was our whole basis of our ADU ordinance. And, I mean, generally speaking, maybe not as much these days, but for many, many years, Pacifica was naturally affordable housing relative to other parts of the county. So I don't want to...
Still is.
Right? Well...
Still is more affordable.
And I don't want us to jam that up. I don't know how else to say it. I'd want that character of Pacifica to continue. So, I don't know. I feel like we need to leave this one for the moment and come back to it. And maybe in light of some of our other discussion, that will shed an eye about, oh, well, how could this apply to this?
Okay.
Yes, that sounds great. And can I just clarify that the distinction between sort of 1 individually owned unit, that's not what we're talking about here. I mean, each individual unit that's owned, to try to make the distinction between some council members that say we're not talking about condos or townhomes, which are typically individually owned. So just as preliminary direction, and you don't have to give it on that, I just want to make sure that's another variable on that.
Right. I mean, but Christine's point, the unit that's a condo, right? That has 8 units versus Creekside condos,
Yeah.
where I live, that has 70 or more units. I mean, they're just not in the same, they're not exactly comparable. So some amount of scale, I think, is something we're gonna have to probably address to make this intelligible, but not this minute. Because
Okay.
this minute, we're gonna turn our attention to what? Do we wanna talk about the the ownership requirements?
Well, we have a presentation
Okay.
to go over all of the
Let's
issues.
do it.
And that is one of them, but that isn't on the next slide.
The next one, okay, good.
Also-
You can tell which one I wanna get to. Go ahead.
Sue Bartelos, it's so good to have you back.
Thank you, Mary.
Hear your brain, it's awesome.
Okay, density.
Yes, thank you. So moving on to the next policy consideration is the density of short-term rentals. So council had requested that staff look into limiting the number of SDRs per neighborhood, per business district, or per street or block. Staff did evaluate a number